What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Concrete Edge right here on Deco-Crete TV. My name's Jeff, and today's episode is dedicated to nothing but sprayers. We're going to be going over some common problems, tips on how to fix those problems, as well as a few other things that's just going to make your sprayers run better and make your life easier so you don't have to let this happen to you.
One of these days, I just kick this piece of shit out the window.
So one of the common things about pretty much all concrete jobs is that we're gonna need some sort of sprayers to spray things like form oil, cure and seal, maybe just some kind of sealer, maybe exposed aggregate retarder. Man, there's all kinds of sprayers all over concrete job sites, and it can be really, really frustrating. There is certainly no perfect sprayer out there. There's nothing we can do to make these sprayers perfect, but what we can do is share a few things that we've learned over the years that'll make your life easier. So to start things off, man, one of the biggest calls that we get are people just coming in is they say, I just bought this brand new sprayer and it just won't even spray. It's never worked from the time I had it out of the box. And so whether that is you or whether you have used your sprayer and it was working and now when you put that lid on, it just doesn't spray, the first thing I would always check is the lid locked down properly? And I know this can sound a little bit funny. I mean, how hard is it really just to put the lid on a sprayer? But these Chapin sprayers, there is a little bit something to making sure this is on right. So if we look down inside here, we see that we have what I would call two steps here in our locking part here. You can see this is the opening here that allows these ears to slide down in, and then we have the top step and we have the bottom step here, and it will not lock in right if it's up here on this top step. And the most common thing is people get it, locked under that top step. They think it's locked down. They crank the threads tight, and what it does is it tightens the threads all the way to the top, but the still not going to be locked down right, and it's not going to seal. Now, when you just loosen this a little bit to try to let it down underneath this second step right here, because you already had your threads so far buried, it's just not even going to let you in there. So you have to loosen this all the way up, and now you can see it'll slide right under that second step there. And once all three ears are under the second steps, all we got to do is just tighten it down, and now it's going to grab on and it's going to create the seal that we're looking for. So if we don't have this on right, it just is never going to have a chance to work even from the beginning. So the next thing that can cause the sprayer to just not be spraying right is if you're leaking a little bit of air somewhere and things just aren't sealing off right. In other words, it's pumping up, it is building some pressure, but it's just not holding the pressure, and it's only going to last 30 seconds or so, and then you got to pump it right away again. And so this generally comes from some sort of air leaking into the sprayer somewhere. One of the most common things is this little O-ring right here. Whether this thing just simply wears out like it does over sometimes, or if it gets a little bit of sealer or something caked up on there, what happens is it won't actually make good contact with the inside of the sprayer. And sometimes it's the inside of the sprayer has sealer and stuff gunked up on that. And when you have it that's not completely smooth down there, it's just not going to seal off right, and you're just going to be constantly leaking air out of there. If you do need to replace this thing here and that's all you need to do, don't worry, we do sell those as a separate item. You can buy just this seal here and you can swap that out if you need to. Now honestly, sometimes just tightening things. Sometimes people don't, even if there is a little bit of stuff built up here and it's possible to get it to seal, we might just have to really crank it down tight in order to create that good seal. Sometimes the connections of your hose, of your wand, anything that is in this system that is before the actual shutoff, any place there that's a little bit loose, it will suck air in and you're going to lose some pressure. So the next thing that can make a sprayer misbehave is just when it's not pumping air at all. And it's not like we're leaking any air. In this case, it's just not building any pressure. You're pumping on the pump, but nothing is happening. And there's not even any air in there to leak. So generally that is gonna all be taken care of somewhere in this pump assembly here. And there's quite a few different parts in here and things to replace. The cool thing is that we have this one kit right here, this extreme repair kit that's got all this stuff in it. So all you gotta do is just buy that one item and you can completely rebuild this pump if you want to.
Hold on to your lug nuts, it's time for an overhaul!
Now, for when it comes to pumping air, the way these things work is there's a little plunger inside this brass piece here that, you know, when you actually run your pump here, it pushes air down through here, and you guys can even hear that the air is hissing out right here. So first thing to check, number one, take your pump out, make sure it's all cleaned up, and then just kind of hold your finger right here, and I can feel that air as I'm actually pumping this thing. So that tells me two things. I'm building pressure, everything in here is working fine, and this little rubber piece here is functioning the way it should. If it's not blowing out of air out of there, what can happen is you get sealer and stuff on there, and that thing almost gets glued down. And you can see, you guys can try this at home. If you hold your fingers over it and you try to pump, it doesn't really work because it's not letting the air out there. And so if it feels like this thing has just got a lot of resistance to it, a lot of times this needs cleaned off. Now, easiest thing to do is just buy this repair kit, peel this guy right out of there and put a brand new one in, and that usually solves the problem. But no matter what, this is what it should sound like right here. It's drawing air here, it's blowing it out here, and that's what's pressurizing your sprayer. Now, and other things that can cause this thing not to pump air properly, again, all you gotta do is just unthread this brass tube here and just pull this guy out. It's gonna have a little bit of resistance, but that's okay, it's just the plunger. So we're gonna pull this guy out, and now we can see some of those other, I know you guys are probably wondering what are the springs and some of those other little pieces for in that rebuild kit. Well, this is the one spring right here. So just remember, there's a diagram in here, but I'm a big fan of just taking pictures of this as you take it apart. That way you can get it right back together the way you need to, so you can replace that spring. This is what that big silver washer for was right here, but this is generally the culprit, is this little guy right here. This is what goes through that tube and actually pushes the air down. And so these things will go bad. This one actually feels like, I thought it was loose, but maybe it's not. But first of all, just make sure your nut's tight.
And you mess with my nut, Brennan? Randy here is gonna eat your...
If this thing seems to have any damage at all, that is gonna really add to the problem. Again, this is in that kit, so just if you're changing some of this other stuff, just change that too. The other thing is just note the orientation of how this thing is on. Definitely seen people put these things on upside down because it kind of makes sense. It seems to go in the tube better that way, but it won't actually build the air right. So just make sure this thing is on just like it is right there. And once you get all that done, you can rebuild all this stuff, and this thing can go back together. But the last thing is this little guy right here, just this little seal that goes between this brass part and the inside of your lid here. And this seal will also go bad at times. So if this seal is damaged or not working properly, now what's gonna happen is we're gonna put this guy back on. But when I thread this back in, you can see as I thread it, it's gonna crush that little O-ring there, and it's gonna create my seal for it. But if it's leaking out of there, it might be doing this, but all it's gonna do is it's just gonna lose it right back out of there again, or it might not even let the air build itself. It might actually cause it to blow air and suck air here. So all of those things are all in the kit. All you gotta do is just very simple, very few tools required. Literally a pliers and a screwdriver is all we need to change this stuff. Now, other things that can go bad on this pump would be this little locking nut right here. And they do sell these as a replacement. And generally what happens with these locking nuts is just from use, from clamping this guy down, locking your pump into place and unlocking it, those little metal pieces right there can just create some wear on them to the point where, this little nut is not going to cause the sprayer to not spray right, but what it will do is it'll cause your pump to not want to lock in place right, and it can be really, really frustrating. And again, pretty easy thing to change, but there is one special tool required. But if you guys look down in there, there is a little ring clamp down in there, and you will need a pair of ring clamp pliers to get that little guy out of there, and that'll free up your locking nut, and then you can put a new one in and you are good to go. And now that that's all back together, everything is gonna work just fine, and I've got basically a brand new, what's gonna function like a brand new pump. So now, on to the Dripless Wands, and man, like I said, these things really have been a game changer when it comes to sealer sprayer wands, because first of all, just the shape of these things, it kind of looks like a pressure washer wand. It's just a lot easier to hold on to. We're not sitting here, killing our thumb all day long. And the other thing is, because it is what's known as the Dripless Wand, the way these things work is it does have a shut off back here. So when I let go of this trigger, it will shut the flow off right here. But you can see that right inside this little, inside this tube here, there is a little brass wand that when I pull the trigger, it's actually gonna open that brass wand here. It's It's gonna let the material flow. When I let the trigger go, that brass wand is gonna close up again. So it's basically what it's doing is two things. It's shutting it off here, just like any other shut-off system would, but it's also shutting off the flow up here so that it won't drip. On a traditional wand, whenever I let this trigger go, whatever was in this piece here is all gonna just run out as drips. In this case, that won't happen. Now, the other great thing about these dripless wands is that you can always challenge your crew to an impromptu game of duck hunter. Now, there are a few things in this wand that we can troubleshoot because there is some stuff in here. You know, there's some moving parts and pieces, so there's some stuff to go wrong. There are a few things, anything back here that's in this part right here. I know there's screws there, but honestly, I wouldn't even recommend taking this guy apart. I've never taken one of these apart and got it back together to where it was working right. So if your trouble's back here, I would buy a new one. If the trouble's up here, we've got a pretty good chance of fixing it. Now, when it comes to tools for this, I mean, of course, there are certain size wrenches, certain kinds of wrenches. I'm sure there's tons of specialty tools out there that could make this really, really easy. But a couple things that are always in our job trailer and our toolbox in our shop is a crescent wrench, a pair of vice grips, and a pair of channel locks. They don't have to be these exact same ones, but you know, having these three things will come in really, really handy for what we're about to do. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this top piece off, and we have to have a piece to hold this. I have made this mistake myself, and I've seen other people do it. If this is really tight on there and there's a little bit of buildup, and I just get on this piece with a pliers and start twisting, it could actually bend this wand because there's nothing holding it. So this little spot here is made so that it has some support on your wand. So once I pull this off, just be careful because there's a little piece inside here, and that's this little piece right here. And without this, the dripless shutoff won't work. Now, this isn't just a little piece of brass. There's actually a little O-ring that's embedded down in that thing, and those are honestly my best recommendation. You can get just this whole piece that's got the O-ring in it. I wouldn't even try to fuss around with changing that unless you were in a pinch on a job site. If this piece isn't in there, or if that little O-ring that's inside this brass piece gets damaged, whenever I let this go, it's not going to shut off right. The flow will probably stop because of what's going on back here, but this will no longer be a dripless wand. It's going to drip out of there like crazy. So always something to check is this little piece right here. Other than that, that's all we really need to mess with on the front here. That's underneath that part. The other thing would just simply be this little O-ring that's right on top of this adapter piece, and that's what is going to allow us to thread pretty much any tip on there. And when it goes down and it hits that O-ring, that's what just created the seal right there. Now, this brings us to a good point. We could put the normal standard half-gallon, gallon-per-minute fan tips on that come with these sprayers. We could put a bullet tip on this, or we could use this T-jet nozzle. So we have a lot of options when it comes to what we want to thread on there. Now, as far as all the other, parts that are available, again, all the tips, everything like that, those can all be bought as separate. And, everything that's in this kit can be really handy if we're doing a full rebuild, kind of like what we just did there. But, all these little O-rings and stuff, you can usually find these things separately. So don't be afraid to give us a call.
No, don't hang up, please.
And ask, tell us what the problem is with your sprayer, and we might be able to diagnose it and be able to solve it just with one little piece. Now, when it comes to some add-ons, there are some good things we can add to our sprayers that's just gonna make life easier. And the first one we already looked at is this little T-jet style tip here, and this is the Deco-Crete even flow tip, and you can see this is meant to thread right on the wand. And this is going to put out a more flow, but in a better way than the normal half-gallon per minute that comes with this. For sealer, we really like that half-gallon per minute flow that comes out of these factory tips. So we're still getting just that very thin application out of it, but we're just doing it faster as we go along. And it's actually going to save you time because it's going to spray more sealer out in a wider area. When it comes to tips and all these things like this, it's also a good idea if you get some buildup on one. I mean, these things do just wear out after a while. You're just gonna have to get a new one. There's no getting around that. But sometimes it's just a little bit of solvent that just hangs up, or a little bit of sealer that just hangs up in the corners. And what it does is it causes these two big streams to kind of come out and nothing in the middle. And just, taking all your tips, just maybe, once a month or something like that. Just take all your tips off your sprayer, just fill yourself up a little container with some xylene or some acetone or some sort of solvent, and just drop those things in there overnight, maybe for 2 days. Let them sit there, pull them back out, take an old toothbrush, and you can clean them up real good, and you can really rehab some tips by just soaking them in some solvent and letting them break down. Now, another add-on that can be helpful is you can get some additional extension wands. So, you guys can see, the length of this wand right now, but let's say I'm spraying something on some concrete that I can't walk on yet, but I need to get whatever it is, maybe it's exposed aggregate retarder. This works really well on there, and I just want to be able to reach out as far as I can. So we can, this will simply just thread right on the end of this wand, and you can keep building these. You can put 2 of these things on, 3 of them. So another thing that can go wrong that's more inside of the sprayer is this little guy right here, which is the outlet tube, and this basically goes down inside your sprayer, and this is what's drawing material from the bottom of your sprayer up into your hose. This kind of makes the whole thing work. So if this piece gets damaged inside your sprayer, it can definitely cause some problems. And the most common thing is these things will get a little hole in them, whether it was just from something dinged it up, or if there was something that was slightly corrosive in your sprayer, it can eventually happen. And if these things develop a hole, and that hole is above the level of your material that's in that sprayer, all it's going to do is suck air into that hole faster than it can draw material from the bottom, and it is not going to spray right at all. Now, this is another fairly inexpensive item. It's really easy to fix. All we got to do is remove our hose. We're just going to remove this little nut right here, and that's going to let the outlet tube free. And now all we got to do is reach down in, pull the old one out, install the new one, put the nut back on, and we are completely good to go. And again, this used to happen to us, when we'd be spraying, either a sealer that's a little bit corrosive, or if we left some kind of corrosive finishing aid in our sprayer overnight, it will happen. Now, speaking of, this sprayer and things that corrode and just things that could break down and degrade the inside of the sprayer, this is the one big advantage to stainless steel sprayers, is that, being the fact they're made out of stainless, they're not corrosive, they don't rust. These red ones are simply just a rolled steel can, and they put this coating on the inside when they're brand new just to keep it from rusting in there. And this is important because we don't want rust happening inside of our sprayer. But there are certain materials we can put in here that might attack that coating, and especially solvents tend to do this over the years in these red cans. And what will happen is that solvent will start to attack that interior coating, and it's going to make it flake just a little bit. And then as it starts flaking off, all those flakes end up at the bottom of your sprayer. They end up running up through your outlet tube, and they ultimately end up in your tip. And if your tip is just clogging up like every 5 seconds, and you've got one of these red can sprayers, I'd recommend taking a look inside there, look at the state of that coating, because if it's flaking off, there's just not a whole lot you can do about it. The best way to get around this is to prevent it from the beginning, and that is, as you're cleaning these sprayers, with solvent, just the easy little trick is just to leave this lid just cracked like this for the first night. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow the vapors from that solvent to escape and leave out the top, rather than being trapped in there all night long and start breaking down that coating. Other than this outlet tube and that coating that's on the inside there's not too much to go wrong with the inside of this sprayer, as long as you don't get a hole or anything in it. So when it comes to all these seals and this hose and everything you see up here, this is all rated what Chapin calls their extreme system. And that just means that, this stuff is all able to handle modern day concrete sealers. And then the other thing that's really going to keep a sprayer working good over the years, again, a lot of this stuff is preventative stuff, and that is just simply doing a good job cleaning these sprayers out. And it might depend on what you're running through it, what you clean it out with. Obviously, if it's just a water-based sealer, just warm water or sometimes hot water is the best thing you can do. As far as for cleaning out sprayers for solvent-based sealers, please check out, we actually have a couple Technique of the Week videos that Jason goes through the whole thing on cleaning these sprayers out. Well guys, that's pretty much it for today's show. Hopefully this helped you out. I know that there are a lot of different working parts and pieces in here, but hopefully you guys found at least one thing that might get you through some trouble on a job site. So thank you guys so much for watching these videos, man. I just can't tell you how blown away we are. As much as our channel's grown over the last couple years, and that is all because of you guys just tuning in every week, always hitting that like button. share them on social media. If you're not already subscribed, please don't forget about that little button down there. It's that long red one that says subscribe on it. Just hit that one right there. If you are already subscribed, that bell icon, that one's important too. That way you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and it really does help our channel out. Also, just leave us a comment. Let us know if we missed anything. Let us know if you guys have any of your own tips or tricks on sprayers and keeping them running better and just less frustration spraying concrete sealer.